And I think that there are some tent poles, which includes that non-discriminatory. Now, if you wanted to say, hey, this is released under the free software ethical license or whatever you want to call it, I think that works. But I think what we've seen is that term open source be hijacked over and over again. And you've seen it evolve over the last 10 years where it started off meaning something very specific and everyone's tried to morph it because there's power in the name, in the term open source.
Oh, 100%. Very
right.
much. Yeah.
And I think that right now with these current licenses that we are talking through and we are working with, that they still try to hook into that open. A lot of them say we're open or we're committed to open software code or open code or whatever. And so they try to massage the language a little bit more. But I'm going to be honest with you, like most of I think like when I talk with people, there is actually a relatively small number of users who use open source and rely on open source and care about open source who actually read the code and who actually spend time in the source. They're choosing it because it's freely available. They're choosing it because it's easy to use. They're choosing it because it has a community behind it, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get involved in either contributing code or reading code, or in a lot of cases, they won't even know the programming language. When you talk about like databases, which I'm familiar with, most of the developers who are using it aren't C developers.
Sure. And this is where, the open source is so broad too, because talking about ReactFlow, even like do you know, like the cathedral versus the bazaar style of development, like we are very much on the cathedral end of development. Like we are a group of 4 core members who are getting paid and we do a bulk of the work. And like, we get to use that. I don't think I'm disagreeing or agreeing. It's just, it's such a wild world where we get to use this word open source but in a lot of ways, like other folks don't contribute. We do leave the door open. We have instructions on how you can contribute, but it doesn't happen nearly as much, probably because we've closed the door in a way. But we do get to benefit a lot from having this open source designation behind our name. And also I think I've heard like there's another company based in Berlin that has switched from open source to source available because they realized that it took so much time to go through all the issues and all the pull requests that people were making. And then they lost those words. And I think they were going for investor rounds and stuff, or they've gotten investment now. And it sounds like if someone wants to go on that path, having the words open source behind it may be important as well. Just amazing how much power is in that word. And I think maybe I saw it on your Twitter feed or something, like this term open washing I've never heard before of, like how do we start using this word in order to like push our own forward.
And I think that this is where a lot of like the recent changes that we've seen, and it's a relatively small number of companies, but it's growing. But it often comes in for business reasons, not ethical or moral kind of reasons. It's for a business reason.
Sure.
And ultimately, the bigger problem isn't necessarily the switch. It's the change in commitment to the community. Because for many people, when you hear the term open source, when you start to use open source, there's some things that go in your mind wrong or different. Number one, that it's the source is available. If the company goes away, the community will help and it's still around to support it. Right. You don't have to pay for it unless there's some compelling reason. You can go in and fix or alter things if you need to. And you do have certain freedoms and rights to it. I think that regardless of like what software you're using, you think that way. And when someone comes along and says for a business decision, we're going to take a step back from that, they peel back some of those freedoms that you had or what you would consider rights that might be available to you. And ultimately, whoever controls the IP controls the destiny. It's the whole Dune thing, right? He who controls the spice controls the universe. Oh, it's he who controls the IP in a lot of cases because they could change that license. Right. And this is where a lot of foundations have tried to step in. And some companies have gone to the mat and said, we're going to donate this project to this foundation. Therefore, you have some guarantees. And so that's one way that you can get that kind of comfort level in a project to say, oh, yeah, this project might be commercialized by this company, but the foundation is the one who really maintains it and owns the underlying property for it.
Yeah. Yeah.